Have you ever wanted to create your own model from NBA data to use that to make predictions about future games? What's up, everybody? This is Kerry. In this video, I'm going to show you how to scrape advanced NBA data from a website, save that as a CSV file, open that CSV file into an Excel spreadsheet, then create a little dashboard in Excel to be able to type in the names and see the data and to make predictions. I'm going to show you this from beginning to end. I'm going to separate this into two separate videos. In this first video, I'm going to show you how to scrape the advanced data. This is similar to my previous videos on scraping, but a little bit more advanced because we have to do something to get a hidden table out of that. And then after that, we're going to save that to a CSV file and open it in Excel and create a table in Excel. That's going to be video number one. In the second video, I'm going to show you how to create a dashboard in Excel that looks at that data. And when you type in the team names into the dashboard, it pulls up their data and makes the predictions about the upcoming game, whether it's a home game or away game or whatever. So that's going to be in the second video. In the first video, we're going to do the scraping. First thing we need to do when we do the scraping is look at the website. Now, this is a popular website, basketballreference.com. There's lots of great data there on different sports here. In this particular one, we're going to look at the Boston Celtics for 2024. Look at the far right-hand side there. It says Game Log Advanced. So this is not the same data that we scraped in the previous video. And the second item there, the table ID is TGL_advanced. We're going to look at that as well. But when it comes down to scraping the data from that website, because the playoff data is in a hidden table, we're going to do something a little bit different than before, which is a nice little trick to show you how to scrape data that is potentially hidden on that website. Let's get to the website. Here's an example of one of the pages where we want to scrape data. Now look at the top here has a URL, and this is the very first table right here. This is for the regular season. And we look at this columns here, the rank, the games, the date, and so on. Goes out here, the opponent, win, loss, and so on, the team points, the opponent points, as the offensive rating. That's one of the things we want, the defensive rating, and the pace. We want all three of those, as well as the points. I'm not really concerned about the rest of these columns. In fact, when we scrape, we're just going to keep these first 10 columns. Now, if we scroll down on this web page, if you look at the bottom here, you'll see we have the playoff data as well. The same exact data, but in a separate table. Now, when we look at this on a phone, or even when we try to scrape this using Python, that's going to be hidden in some HTML hidden code. We can see this in the web browser pretty easily, but when we try to scrape it using the read HTML from the pandas library, it's not going to see this table. So we have to do a little bitty trick here to remove the comment that hides this table. Now, I'll talk about that little trick when we look at the code. Okay, here's our code. Again, this is very similar to the scraping videos I've done previously, but with some noticeable differences here. In particular, look at the top cell here. We're going to use the requests library from Python to scrape all the data on this particular web page. We're also going to use string IO. This allows us to use the response from our request to the web page. We look at the text, convert it to string IO for pandas read HTML to work. Let's go ahead and run this cell. And of course, the cell below that is the same as before, where we have the team codes, the three-letter codes. There's 30 teams in the NBA. And in the cell below that, we're going to have the team dictionary. This is a three-letter code as the key and the team name as the value. I use this dictionary to put the team names in there. I just want ATL in one column and Hawks in the next column. That's again 30. If we look up here now, I'm not going to scrape all the seasons, just 2024. That's the only data we want to look at here for this model. So here's the main cell. We're going to create a blank NBA data frame. We're going to iterate through all the seasons. Now that's just one season, 2024. We're going to iterate through all the teams, ATL, BOS, and so on. And here's the URL that we talked about at the beginning of the video. It's the same as before, except at the very end, we have Game Log Advanced. So that's where we get the advanced data. And this is what's new. We're making a request, a GET request to the web server. We use a URL, and I like to put in here the headers user agent equals Mozilla 5.0. This just makes the website think that we're accessing it through a browser and not through a Python script. That's a nice little touch there that helps alleviate some of the potential blocking of your script from that web server. This gives us what's called a response object. But what we really want here is just simply the HTML. So what we're going to do here is look at the response.txt at the next line down. And right away, we're going to replace this less than exclamation mark double dash. That is a default for comments in HTML. And that's how this table is hidden, the playoff table. We're going to replace it with an empty string. So what I call that is the visible HTML. So now we're going to be able to see both tables. And in the next line, we're going to do pd.readHTML. But this time, rather than going straight to that website, we've already got the HTML in the response object. We're going to convert the visible HTML to a string IO object that allows the read HTML function to operate properly. So again, the headers are in the first row, and this gives us a list of data frames. If that list only has one item in it, then that's just simply the regular season. And we set the team data frame to be df_list bracket 0. That's the first item in that list. If the length is more than one, then it's going to have two tables that we read. And the first thing I'm going to do is look at df list 1. That would be the playoff table. So in that table, I'm going to convert the game number from its original value to plus 82. So this is just something I like to do. And the playoff table says game 1, 2, 3, and so on. Well, because I'm going to combine that with the regular season, I'm going to make that game 83, 84, and 85. Look down here. Now we're going to concatenate these two tables together. This is where we combine the regular season and the playoff tables together. df list 0 and df list 1. We ignore the index. And this is very popular pandas concat function. And this gives us our team data frame. So if the team did not make the playoffs, then up here, it just becomes a regular season table. If they did make the playoffs, then we combine the regular season with the playoff table, and we get that for the team data frame. Just because the team didn't make the playoffs, we don't want to remove them from our data set, right? All those 82 games from the regular season matter. They matter quite a bit. So we want to include all the teams in this data set, not just the ones that make the playoff. We're going to do a few things here. I'm going to drop all the rows where the game is NaN. And some of those rows are just a bunch of blanks there. And we also have rows that repeat the headings. So in those rows, G is actually the value of that column. I don't want those either. So we're going to drop all those rows and just keep the rows that have numbers in them. We're going to reset the index and drop the current one. That leaves us with just the data. And this next line of code that I mentioned when I showed you the actual web page, I'm just going to keep the first 10 columns. So I'm using iloc here to keep all the rows, but as far as columns go, I go 1 up to 10. Remember that last number is always one more than the number of columns. I'm going to rename some columns. Unnamed 3 is the at column there. TM is the offensive points. OPP.1 are the defensive points. The at column, I'm going to make this an at symbol, which it already is, or I put in there a blank cell. So for this next one, I'm creating an actual column called win. That is the WL column. If X is a W, I put a 1 in there. Then that means that that team won the game. Otherwise, we put in a 0. And then finally, I'm going to drop that WL column. Now, all of these lines here, since the scraping is just making the data look the way we want it to look, adding some columns, maybe move some things around. We're going to insert 3 new columns: season, team, and name. Now, the value for the season is the actual season value. The team is the team code, that's BOS for Boston. And the name is where I use that team dictionary right here. So if I send this dictionary BOS, it'll come back with Celtics. So that's going to be 3 new columns. And again, this is for every single team here. The location column is going to be the at column, but instead of having the at symbol there, if X equals at in the at column, I'm going to get the word away in my location column. Otherwise, I'll get the word home. I want these 2 words in there, home and away. And when I do this insert right below that, this is a very common technique here where I pop that column because I want it in a certain location, and I create a new column at index 6 here, name it the same thing. So the overall effect here is moving that new column from the end into column 6. I'm going to do the same thing with the opponent name, OPP name. This again uses the opponent 3-letter code in the column OPP. It's got the end of the data frame. I'm going to move it into position 8. Now I realize for all these are very specific locations, 0, 2, 3, 6, and 8. That's because I'm looking at that particular table, the advanced data, and putting these in those specific columns where I want them right next to each other. Finally, that is the team data frame. We did a lot of manipulation there. We're going to add this onto the NBA data frame. So again, it'd be ATL for Atlanta, then BOS for Boston, and so on. We're going to get all the regular season advanced data and the playoff data. And the final step here is to put this to sleep between 4 and 6 seconds, because again, we want to abide by the website rules. And at the very end, after all the scraping is done, I'm going to print the shape to see how many columns there are and how many rows there are. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and you can see how this works when it scrapes. That first one is Atlanta, 2024 advanced game log data. That's all the regular season. And for Boston, takes the regular season advanced data plus the playoff advanced data. Now, because we're just doing this for one season, there's 30 teams. It's about 5 seconds per team. It's 150 seconds. So that's just 2.5 minutes. That's not a long time to wait. Okay, you can see now we have 2,512 rows. That includes all the regular season data for 30 teams. That's 82 games. That's from the regular season table, and playoff data up until April 27th, 2024. I just like to print the data frame now to see what it looks like here. And you can see at the top here, the season, the game, Atlanta Hawks, the date, the at symbol, location that's away, Charlotte Hornets they played in that first game. And a little bit lower down here, we see that they scored 110 points against 116 points for the Hornets. That's the offensive rating, and the defensive rating, and the pace for the Atlanta Hawks. And of course, since the O points are less than the D points, the win is a 0. So this is the data set that we're going to save to a CSV file. In this next cell, we're simply going to convert some of these columns to the appropriate data type. For some reason, these came out as object types, which is not good. Of course, I want the O points and D points here in the game numbers to all be integers. And I want the offensive rating, defensive rating, and pace to all be floats. So we're going to run that cell as well. Now, I like to print the info here, and I don't need to print the head anymore because we already did that. And you can see now that we have our data frame here, 2,512 rows, opponent points, defensive points, offensive rating, defensive rating, pace, and are all numerical types, which is perfect. And of course, the win is also, it's a 1 or a 0. Finally, as always, probably the most important step here is we want to save this to a CSV file. So I take this NBA_DF to CSV, and I name mine NBA-advanced-gamelogs-2024.csv, and always make sure the index is false so you don't save that as a first column in your CSV. So once you save that to a CSV, congratulations, you scraped all the data you need, and it's now on your local storage. Let's open up Excel and see what this looks like. Okay, when you open this up in Excel, it's a CSV file, so Excel recognizes it immediately. It looks like this. If you look at the top, we see the column names that we had in our data frame and the ones that we added when we did all the Python code there. Now this data is just begging for us to make a table out of it. So what I'm going to do here is click in cell A1. I'm going to press Control T on my keyboard here. Look at what happens to my data sheet. It says this is your table, and now I have this as a table. It's much easier to access cells from a table name than it is from actual cell references from a different sheet. Notice here that column E is the date. It has all these hashtags in there. Just go between columns E and F and double click, and that expands it. And now we have the actual date showing here. Now with this table selected, we have this table design option in Excel. I'm going to click on that, and you can see here the table name on the far left-hand column here says table 1. So anytime you want to access the data, you can say table 1 and in brackets put in the column name. So if I want to get the offensive rating, for example, I can say table 1 brackets ORTG. And make sure you go ahead and save this because this isn't a CSV file. You might have to redo this the next time you open it up. But if you wanted to, you could save this as an Excel spreadsheet and that table format would be preserved. That's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this video and got some value from it. If you did, please like this video. Consider subscribing to my channel. See you in the next video.